Have you ever been interested in making some sort of change or leveling up your skills in some way, but then you get discouraged because you don't see any results? Maybe you tried reading a book on influence, or maybe you even got a sample plan for a running routine, but then after a few weeks, it just dropped off because nothing changed for you. Now, there could be a lot of variables that impact those good intentions that you started off with. You could fall off the wagon for a lot of different reasons, but none of them are as impactful as the fact that you were merely interested in the change. Your interest is something that only makes you think about it. It only makes you, at best, dabble in what you're trying to do. When you're interested, you take action, but it's in a trial state of mind. However, have you ever been committed? I mean, committed to the change. It's just a part of your new identity. You aren't sampling a running routine, you are a runner. You aren't reading about leadership, you are a leader. So, my question is, this year, as we move into 2025, are you interested in making a change or are you committed? And if you're not sure, I know we are only a few days in, but if you are not sure, take a look at the results you have and the habits you have, and they will tell you a lot about where you want to go. All right, let me just give you a quick example from my own life because there is a reason that I say interested in sampling a running plan. Because at one point I was interested in running and also gaining weight, which just with that level of cardio doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? So, to start the story, we have to go all the way back to when I was in high school. One of our basketball coaches started complimenting me on my running. I just thought running was something people were born with the ability to do. And in our very, very small school, we didn't have any sort of running teams. There was no track, there was no cross country. But this coach told me that if we did have those, I would be an absolute standout because of my technique. Now, I will admit that I didn't really know what that meant, but I held on to it for years. And when I went into college, I even took wellness classes because we had to take wellness classes, but I intentionally took the ones that focused on running because that's where I thought my skills and my talents were. So I would go for runs, I would go periodically. And when people would ask, I would say, I'd like to be a runner, but we didn't have that when I was in school. Now, I'd go for a run and then I'd come back and eat a cheeseburger. Or I'd skip, any sort of workout for a week or more. And then I would tell the story about how that basketball coach thought that I could be something, thought that I would be a standout. And then I would go run a mile just to prove that that was still possible, right? I'd run for maybe 2 or 3 days straight and then I'd take a few weeks off because I got the sniffles or maybe something just didn't feel right in my knee. And at the time, it all made sense because I was just interested in running. And to say that I was dabbling even feels like a stretch because it was so sporadic. Sure, I would run sometimes, but I was by no means committed to it. The slightest reason to pull away from that identity, I would just fall off that running train. But when I committed, everything changed. Years later, I had completely fallen away from running. I mean, I was running maybe a mile, maybe 2 once a week. I would say I run sometimes, but I'm not a runner. And then I accidentally ran 5 miles, which sounds very silly, but I promise you it was an accident. I was looking for a friend in a race. And if you want to learn more about that, because I'm not going to go into that one, but there is an article on that. I'll link that below if you want to see it. But, anyways, I started to remember my coach's words like, oh, I do have the technique to do this, whatever that is. I do have the ability to kind of pull this out and build this talent into a skill and into a strength. So I signed up for a half marathon after just being a very sporadic runner sometimes. accidentally running 5 miles, and then I was like, 13.1? Okay. Now, I was still just dabbling at the time that I was training for this run, and then my sister reminded me that I am a runner. If I'm running, I am a runner. Now, she is a multi-marathoner, okay? She runs all the time. She didn't give me a plan. She didn't tell me to run more. She didn't tell me to run longer or faster or any of that. She didn't give me any more education. She simply changed my commitment because she changed my identity. She pointed out that I was a runner. And suddenly, by putting on that identity, it just became so difficult to skip a run. It sounded like it made more sense to run 8 or even 10 miles than it did to not run at all during a day. Running anything under 4 miles, so those 1 to 2 miles that I was doing to, like, prove that I could still run, those now felt like something that could just be a sprint or would do on a rest day. Rather than seeing running as inconvenient and trying to, fit it in to see if it would work, now I was planning my whole day around it. I was a runner, so I was committed to running. Period. The end. That was the story. Now, yes, that might sound true for running, but what about in professional growth? Because that's what you came here for, right? Not a tutorial on going for a run. But are you interested or are you committed to your professional growth? Now, a similar thing happened to my story, but with a leader that I was working with. She had come from a very toxic work culture, and she was sort of like brought up in the culture that prized sitting at your desk for like 10, 12 hours a day. She would scour through notes for any opportunity to push sales, and she was expected to make endless cold calls and focus on hitting revenue goals over anything else. Now, as you might imagine, it started taking its toll on her mentally, socially, even physically. She decided that she would look for a position leading a team because she wanted to fix this. She wanted to lead a similar sales team, but in a different organization because she needed to rebuild that culture, she thought. She was very interested in getting results with a positive work environment and culture. Notice the word there. She was super interested in it. After she found the right position, she focused first and foremost on creating that work environment for her team that she herself had always wanted. She was committed to supporting the team. She was committed to supporting the team and interested in achieving revenue goals with culture at the forefront. Now, her commitment to the team had some results, right? Because you will get results from your commitment. Her commitment was a little misplaced, though. So, committed to supporting the team looked like her working the same long hours as she always had been, scouring through their notes for opportunities. She started making cold calls herself because she didn't wanted to make sure that they didn't feel the same pressure that she had felt. She started to get more pain in her back, her hip, her wrists, because she was never leaving her desk. She realized that she needed help. She went out to solve this problem, and maybe she did solve it for some people, but only by adding more weight and more pressure to herself. Now, I think you'll see the error of her ways based on what we've already talked about, but she looked to me thinking that I would give her better information. She came to me, she started following my videos, she gave me a call, we started working together because she thought that I would give her the golden nugget of knowledge that would get her through. Except she already knew how to get results. She already knew how to hit goals. She didn't need information. It wasn't information that I was going to give her. What she needed was a commitment to leading results and culture. Now, I know we're always told that knowledge is power. And As much as I like to pay respects to the leaders of the past who have come up with these great thought leadership phrases like knowledge is power, it just isn't true. Knowledge does not give you power, application does. Do you need knowledge to be able to apply? Sure. But it is that application that actually gives you the power. Because you will get nowhere with simple interest in getting results. Because that interest motivates you only to learn more. Like we said in the beginning, you might read a book, you might watch a YouTube video like this one, you might try some things out, but most people won't apply it. Let's think about another super simple example. In the beginning of the year, you might be interested in the health benefits of drinking more water. You hear all kinds of people talking about how important it is to drink more water. Now, your interest in it may cause you to Google or check on ChatGPT for how much water you yourself need. You can give it all the specifics, you can get all of the information you need. Now, you might even take it one step further. You might dabble. You might grab yourself a brand new giant Stanley cup, right? That would be perfect. But it isn't until you identify as someone who drinks a gallon of water a day that you truly start drinking water like life depends on it. It's the action, it's the application, it's the commitment to leads that leads to the results, right? Because having the Stanley Cup, knowing the exact amount of ounces that are right for your body, all of that is fine, but it doesn't actually get you the benefits of drinking the water. The interest just gets you to dabbling in it. Now, I was interested in running, right? Which had me running a couple miles a week sporadically. This client of mine, she was interested in culture. She was interested in getting results with the team. And all that did was result in more stress around how she wasn't creating what she set out to do. And it wasn't until we each committed to what we wanted that we saw the results that we were hoping to achieve. For me, locking into that identity as a runner had me running more than 600 miles in under a year and got me into the best shape of my life. For this client, commitment to leading culture and results had her exceeding revenue goals in half the time. She exceeded her annual revenue goal in half the time, with, not to mention, a team that had each other's back both professionally and personally all across the country. They weren't like sitting in one room together, building that bond. They were virtually building a culture that had them having each other's back on everything from kids to parents to those revenue goals that they were smashing out of the water. Commitment breeds endurance. That was true for me in running the miles, and that was true for her in leading that team. Now, just to be clear, because I know that I am going hard on commitment, I just want to be super clear on one thing. You are not less of a person without the commitment. I wasn't less of a person because I was dabbling in running. Running didn't make me more valuable. Just like exceeding those revenue goals didn't make my client more valuable as a person. But what it did was change the standard. It changed the standard in general for what life looked like. So, for example, when I fell into the identity of someone who was interested in a few things, I was more likely to give up on literally everything. I was more likely to try things and then move on from them. But when I committed to one thing, running in my case for this example, when I committed to that one thing, my tolerance for dabbling in the other areas of life reduced drastically because your commitment will impact more than what you're committed to. That is where that endurance comes from, my friend. When my client committed to leading results in culture, she got her health back. It wasn't because she was striving to make some changes in her health. No, it was once she locked in as a leader, she saw the importance of leading in all aspects of her life. She started going for walks during the day. She started focusing on eating and, yes, drinking water to fuel her body. instead of relying on Diet Coke to pull her through. It was taking a proactive stance on leading people. It was taking a proactive stance on commitment. Just like I was rearranging my day to make sure that my run fit in, she was rearranging her life to make sure that she was leading first. So for her, it even went so far as within a couple of months, she actually had cultivated enough energy by committing and locking into leading her team the way she wanted to, that she was able to start renovating her house in the evenings. Can you imagine? How amazing would it be if you had the energy to renovate your house because you locked in your career? It's just incredible. So, as you might have put together if you are a lover of quotes and sayings as I am, this is one of those all ships rise with the tides situations. Your level of commitment and your identity, it spills over. So when I committed to running, I got better sleep. My house was cleaner. My kids were happier. I felt generally more fulfilled because I was committed, not because I ran, because I was committed to something. Now, it wasn't about the amount of miles, it wasn't about the frequency of miles. It was about the commitment to the identity that had a standard above where I used to be. I was no longer just dabbling. She was no longer just dabbling. She had locked into that new identity. You can lock into that identity too, whatever that is for you. Maybe it's not a runner. Maybe it's not combining results and culture. Though, if you are leading people in a work environment, I certainly hope that those are two things very high on your priority list. But when you commit to a new identity that increases your standard for yourself, you transform into someone of a higher caliber. Not more valuable, as I said before, but just with a higher standard. You hold yourself differently. Your shoulders go back, your head goes up. You are a better version of yourself because you locked in one area. You can lock in then in all of them. And I would love to explore what is possible on the other side of this commitment for you, what transformation that would cause for you. And I am going to put the link down below. Let's talk about it. Let's get on a phone call and just figure out what that version of you could look like and how all of those ships in your life can rise with that tide. All right. I hope that this was inspiring and impactful for you. If it was, hit that share button, share it with someone else who needs to have this message in their life today. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Get after it. You got this.